I knew something was wrong the moment I heard metal scraping against concrete. I mean, there are some sounds that just freeze you in place, and this was one of them. So I looked out my kitchen window, and yeah, that's when I saw her. Karen, our HOA president, standing on my pool deck, crowbar in hand, flanked by two so-called officers from her committee. They were trying to pry the posts out of the privacy fence I'd just finished installing the day before, like they were repo men collecting on some cosmic debt. She hadn't seen me yet, too busy barking orders, waving her arms around like she owned the sun. Get it off his property before he thinks he can do whatever he wants, she snapped. And I almost laughed. Because what she didn't know was that fence sat entirely on my land. I'd had my surveyor document every inch marked, every line, and just for good measure, I'd put up cameras the night before because I knew deep down that she'd try something bold. See, I'm not just some clueless homeowner I consult on property rights for a living. I've seen plenty of power trips, but this one was about to get personal. This wasn't my first battle, but it was shaping up to be the most public. And right then I realized once I stepped outside, phone in hand, everything would change. I'd spent years fighting other people's property fights, never my own. Honestly, I'd bought this place with its pool, the tall trees, the gentle slope behind it, because I needed peace. Just a small corner of the world where no one could dictate how I lived. That was the dream anyway. For a little while, things were quiet. The neighbors waved, we talked about the weather, swapped lawn care tips, nothing crazy. Then came the new HOA leadership. That's when Karen showed up on my radar. She had this air about her perfect hair-clipped voice, a smile that never quite touched her eyes. You know the type. The moment I mentioned putting up a privacy fence, she gave me this look, eyebrow arched, like I just suggested painting the house neon pink. We like to keep the neighborhood open concept, she said, like she was the curator of some suburban museum. She hadn't even seen my plans, but somehow she already knew she didn't approve. The thing is, the fence was legal. Every measurement, every material, every placement compliant with both city code and the HOA's own rules. I checked, double-checked, triple-checked. Still, she acted like privacy itself was some kind of attack on her authority. I wanted that fence for simple reasons. Safety, peace, the freedom to swim in my own backyard without neighbors gawking. But the way Karen talked down to me, you'd think I was trying to build a fortress. There were whispers about her, about the HOA, but I shrugged them off at first, just neighborhood gossip, I figured. Yeah, I was wrong. Because what nobody told me was just how far Karen and her board would go when someone refused to bow down. That day on my pool deck when they crossed that line, well, that was it. I wasn't about to let it slide. I bought this house when I was burnt out, running on fumes from years of fighting other people's battles. I'd spent most of my adult life in rentals, thin walls neighbors who thought silence was optional. So when my last lease ended, I cashed out, sold everything, and bet it all on this home. Not for the bricks, not for the status, but for the pool, that glimmer of water in the afternoon light that felt like a promise, a place I could finally breathe. I walked the property with my surveyor before moving in, following the orange markers, checking every boundary. The fence would sit well inside my line, no complications, no gray area. The rules were clear fences up to 6 feet neutral color inside your own boundary. That's it. The previous owner had kept his head down, didn't make waves, and people said he avoided trouble by just being quiet. I didn't think much of it. Everything looked clean. The rules were on my side. What could possibly go wrong? My first run-in with the HOA was almost comical. Saturday morning, stepping out to grab a package, and there's Karen at the end of my driveway binder, tucked under her arm like a holy relic. Just checking on standards, she said, stretching the word like it belonged in the Constitution. Her sidekick, a wiry guy with a clipboard, just nodded, scribbling who knows what. I started calling him Clipboard Buddy in my head. They inspected my mailbox, frowned at my pool, warned me about disturbing the peaceful sound balance. Never mind that I hadn't even swum in it yet. And then her favorite line, "You'll need approval for everything. Not some things, everything." By the end of my first month, 3 violation notices had shown up. My hedge was too tall, my trash cans were an inch too close to the curb, and I'd allegedly done unauthorized modifications, which for the record was just fixing a loose pool tile. It didn't take long to realize they weren't enforcing rules, they were enforcing obedience. And I was the new target. The privacy fence was my line in the sand. It wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. After years of mediating for others, I wanted weekends where I could float in peace, not brace for another demand. That fence was the difference between healing and burnout, and deep down Karen knew it. For her control was everything. If I put up my fence without her blessing, someone else might do the same and her power would start to slip. When I filed the fence application, I did everything by the book form, survey specs, time-stamped receipt. The admin said I was all set. I actually believed her for about a week. Then came the email, no record of my submission. I sent them the receipt. An hour later, the story changed. Now the form was incomplete. What part? No answer. 2 days later, another excuse: the review committee only met quarterly, so my request was delayed until further notice. There wasn't even a review committee in the rules. The contradictions piled up so fast, I started a folder just to keep track. Wrong height, wrong material. Now they needed neighbor signatures. None of it was in the bylaws. Every time I cleared one hurdle, they threw up another. Then Karen came to my door, unannounced, binder in hand. "Nothing happens in this neighborhood without my signature," she said. I kept calm. I followed the CCNRs I told her. "Compliance is one thing, community image is another," she replied like that was gospel. Clipboard buddy just scribbled away, already sure of my guilt. "Can you point me to the exact rule I'm violating?" I asked. Her smile tightened. "This isn't about rules. It's about harmony. Harmony, like my fence, was disrupting the spiritual balance of the entire subdivision." She left without an answer, and it hit me. These weren't accidents. They were tactics. A campaign to make me give up before I even started. That's when the violation notices got personal. First, excessive pool noise when I hadn't even used the pool. Then unauthorized construction for fixing a piece of siding. Next, improper landscaping, even though my yard looked exactly the same as move-in day. The fines were real, and neighbors started treating me like a problem. People stopped waving. Kids stopped playing near my house. Isolation crept in, and Karen started shaping a story about me, the rule breaker, the outsider. It hurt more than I care to admit. I bought this house for peace, and now I felt like I was on trial in my own neighborhood. The worst part, I'd seen these tactics before in my own cases. Pressure isolation rumors until the problem either submits or moves out. Now I was living it. Then came the escalation. Late one night, I heard the screech of metal, the sound of my pool gate being messed with. Someone had entered my yard. I found footprints too big to be a kid, too deep to be someone just passing by. I documented everything. My lawyer friend confirmed that this wasn't just an HOA overstepping, it was trespassing. The morning Karen and her crew showed up with crowbars, I was ready. I started recording before I stepped outside. "What do you think you're doing?" I asked. She smiled. "Enforcing community standards. This fence was never approved." "It's on my property," I said. Camera rolling. "Construction approval isn't required." She waved me off, told the workers to keep going. Clipboard buddy stepped forward. "Board authorized removal," he said, like that meant anything. "You're trespassing," I told them. "This is a privately deeded lot." Karen scoffed. I dialed the sheriff right there, describing what was happening. And for the first time, Karen looked rattled. The deputies arrived fast. They walked the boundary with me, looked at the paperwork, watched the footage. "This is all within your boundary?" the deputy asked. "Every inch," I said. He turned to Karen. "Did you receive consent to enter his property?" "We don't need consent," she shot back. "This violates neighborhood harmony." The deputy just blinked. Neighborhood harmony isn't a legal standard. That was the turning point. The officers began taking statements. Karen shrank just a little. I kept recording every word, every look. Evidence. That's how these battles are really won. I filed for an injunction, a claim for damages, and a request to have the HOA pay legal fees. When the court served the HOA, the panic set in. Suddenly, Karen was all about diplomacy and misunderstandings. But I wasn't interested in smoothing things over. I wanted a real line drawn. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Karen strutted in pearls and blazer, acting like she was at her own coronation. Her lawyer tried to make it sound like I'd defied the spirit of the community. The judge raised an eyebrow. Show me where spirit appears in your CCNRs. Silence. Then it was my turn. I laid out every contradiction, every violation, every minute of footage showing Karen on my deck barking orders. The judge's expression didn't change, but when I played the audio, the mood in the room did. Karen tried to spin it. We were enforcing community aesthetics, Your Honor. The judge wasn't having it. Aesthetics are not grounds for trespassing. She granted the injunction on the spot, prohibited the HOA from setting foot on my property, and scheduled a damages hearing. And then, for good measure, she looked Karen dead in the eye and said, I strongly suggest the HOA seek new leadership. What I see here is not governance, it is abuse of power. After the ruling word spread, the fines were steep enough to drain the HOA's reserves. The community held an emergency meeting. Half the neighborhood showed up. Residents started sharing their own stories about Karen's reign, petty fines, intimidation threats. The vote to remove her as president was unanimous. She walked out without a word, binder clutched to her chest, power gone in a blink. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. Neighbors apologized. Kids started playing outside again. The board restructured. The HOA started acting like it was supposed to serving, not ruling. The peace I fought for finally arrived, not with fireworks, but with laughter drifting across yards and quiet evenings by the pool. See the real lesson here. Privacy isn't a luxury, it's dignity. The right to exist in your own space, to breathe, to rebuild. That's what Karen never understood. I didn't fight because I love drama. I fought because I was tired of giving my peace away. This was about defending a piece of myself, something I'd almost lost after years of fighting for everyone else. The day I finally repainted that fence, new color, fresh start, I let the past go with every brush stroke. Not erasing it, just restoring what mattered. The violation letters I tossed in a box and let the recycling truck carry them off. That right there felt better than any courtroom win. So here's what I want to know. Where do you draw the line between rules and overreach? When does community harmony turn into control? Have you ever had to stand up to someone like Karen? Drop your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your take. And if you've got your own story about fighting for what's right, or just want to sound off on what justice really means, let's talk about it. Because sometimes standing your ground isn't about winning, it's about finally coming home.